My daughter confessed in a trembling voice, "I sold your lake house for $200,000. Her husband added cheerfully, "It covered my debts, and now I'm free." I said nothing, got up, and walked away, hiding my anger. A week later, the new owners shouted into the phone, "Why is the FBI in the house?" Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Jennifer's hands trembled as she poured the coffee. Third time tonight, she'd started to speak, then stopped. I watched her from across the table, fork resting against my plate. The salmon had gone cold 20 minutes ago. "How was Canada, Dad? Did the fish bite?" "Good. Peaceful." Brian leaned back in his chair, phone face up beside his plate. "Peace is what I've been missing lately." The way he said it, casual, like he was commenting on the weather, made something tighten in my chest. Jennifer glanced at him, then at me, then down at her untouched dessert. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, darkness pressed against the windows. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about—" She stopped, touched her neck. "About the lake house." I set down my fork carefully. "What about it?" She looked at her plate. Words came out in a rush. "You know you haven't been there much lately, and Brian and I sold it for $200,000. The coffee cup felt suddenly heavy in my hand. I set it down. "What did you do?" Silence stretched. The kitchen clock became unbearably loud. Jennifer's breathing had gone shallow. Brian checked his phone again, that slight smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "It was the right decision, Ron. Seriously." Brian's voice filled the space like he owned it. "That money cleared my poker debts, $65,000. Now I'm free. I can breathe again. You should congratulate me." I looked at him, really looked. He sat there, sprawled comfortable in the chair I'd helped Jennifer pick out 3 years ago, talking about freedom bought with my property. Jennifer's voice cracked. "Brian was being threatened, Dad. The people he owed money to, it was dangerous. I had to do something. He's my family." "I understand." Those 2 words seemed to confuse her more than anger would have. She blinked, mouth opening like she'd prepared for a fight and found empty air instead. I stood. The chair scraped against hardwood. My jacket hung on the back. I'd been here less than an hour, still had my travel bag by the door. Hadn't even unpacked. I pulled the jacket on slowly, each movement deliberate. "Dad, please." "The way out has already been found." I looked at Brian. He was still checking his phone. "Your husband is free." I turned to Jennifer. Her eyes were wet now, confusion mixing with something that might have been guilt. "Enjoy your dinner." The front door closed behind me with a solid click. Cool May air hit my face. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the lit windows of the house. Through the curtains, I could see Jennifer standing, Brian still sitting, talking probably, deciding I was being dramatic, that I'd come around. The engine turned over, headlights cut through the darkness. I had a lot of work ahead of me. The drive home took 90 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. Highway lights passed overhead in regular rhythm. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. My hands stayed locked at 10 and 2. The key turned in my apartment door at 9 o'clock. I flipped one lamp on. The living room looked exactly as I'd left it 2 weeks ago. Neat, sparse, functional. I dropped my travel bag by the door and walked to the kitchen table. Pulled out the chair. Sat. The lake house keys were still in my pocket. I set them on the table. Brass against wood. 20 years I'd owned that property. Built half of it with my own hands. Not just a house. My voice sounded strange in the empty apartment. It's the address for 3 companies, 20 years of business. I stood and crossed to the bookshelf. Behind the second row of books, the safe's dial caught the lamplight. Right 23, left 41, right 17. The mechanism clicked. The door swung open. 3 folders. I pulled them out and carried them to the kitchen table. Lakeside Property LLC, Miller Accounting Services LLC, Northwood Investments LLC, each one registered to the lake house address, each one part of a structure I'd built carefully, legally, paying every tax on time, following every rule. "You sold what couldn't be sold, Jenny." I spread the documents across the table. The power of attorney was in the Lakeside Property folder, dated 2018, signed by both of us. I read it slowly. limited to paying utilities and property taxes in the event of owner incapacity or extended absence. Nothing about selling, nothing about transferring ownership. Coffee. I needed coffee. The pot gurgled as I worked, filling the apartment with the smell of dark roast. I drank the first cup standing at the counter, then poured another and returned to the table. By midnight, I'd made a list. 1. Sale without my permission, theft. 2. Violation of business structure, tax consequences. 3. Brian, gambling debts, dangerous people, possible criminal connections. 4. Jennifer, exceeded power of attorney authority. The pen moved across paper steadily now. My handwriting looked different than it had 2 hours ago, sharper, more controlled. I cross-referenced documents, made notes in margins, circled key passages. The transformation happened somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was reading the LLC registrations when I felt it, the shift from victim to strategist. A cold smile appeared on my face. I caught my reflection in the darkened window. An old man staring back, yes, but not a fool. You thought I'd just swallow this? That I'm some old fool who'll forgive everything for the sake of family? I spoke to the empty room. Justice has nothing to do with forgiveness. By 3 a.m., the strategy was forming. Legal angles, financial implications, criminal possibilities. I'd need Lawrence Stewart, my lawyer, and I'd need Jennifer's cooperation, whether she wanted to give it or not. I fell asleep at the table, head on my arms, surrounded by papers. The garbage truck woke me at 6. Gray light filtered through the windows. My neck ached, but my mind was clear, crystalline, sharp, focused. The decision had settled during those few hours of sleep, sinking into place like a key in a lock. At 7:30, I called Lawrence. It rang 4 times. Ron, Sunday morning, 7:30, someone dead? My lake house. My daughter sold it without my knowledge. Wait, how did she sell it? She didn't have the right. Exactly. And it's not just a house. It's the legal address for Lakeside Property, Miller Accounting, and Northwood. Christ, Ron, that's serious. Who are the buyers? Don't know yet, but I will. I need a meeting. Today. Come to the office at 2. Bring every document you have. See you then. I ended the call and opened my phone's messages, typed slowly, choosing each word. We need to talk, officially. Bring all documents related to the house sale. Tomorrow, my apartment, 10 a.m., without Brian. I read it once, sent it. The coffee pot was empty again. I'd lost count of how many cups. Didn't matter. I pulled the documents into organized stacks, placed them in my briefcase, checked my watch. 7 hours until the meeting with Lawrence. Time to move forward. Lawrence Stewart's office occupied the 9th floor of a glass tower downtown. I arrived 15 minutes early, briefcase in hand. The morning had been spent organizing every document, laying them in precise order. The drive took 30 minutes through Sunday traffic, light, easy, giving me time to think. The receptionist wasn't there. Sunday. Lawrence opened the door himself. Ron, he stepped aside. Conference room. The space was all wood and glass. Certificates lined one wall. Through the windows, Minneapolis spread below us, buildings catching afternoon light. We sat across from each other at the long table. I opened my briefcase. 3 folders, I said, placing them between us. Lakeside Property LLC, Miller Accounting Services LLC, Northwood Investments LLC. Lawrence pulled the first folder closer. His glasses caught the light as he read. Minutes passed. He moved to the second folder, then the third. I watched his expression change, professional concern deepening into something sharper. All 3 companies used the lake house address. His finger traced a line on the LLC registration. For tax purposes, for official correspondence. 20 years. I kept my voice level. Every filing, every return, that address. He set down his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a cloth from his pocket, put them back on. A tell. I'd worked with Lawrence long enough to know. Ron, this is worse than I thought. If the address changed without notifying the IRS, the tax service will open an investigation. Not just an investigation. Lawrence stood, walked to a file cabinet against the wall. They might assume income concealment. That's a federal crime. Good. He turned, folder in hand. Good. Ron, these are your companies, which I didn't transfer and didn't hide. I have clean documentation for 20 years. Jennifer and Brian don't. Lawrence returned to the table, placed the new folder down carefully. I recognized it immediately. The power of attorney from 2018. He opened it to the second page. Do you remember what this says? Limited authority for bill payments during my absence or incapacity. Read the final paragraph. He turned the document toward me. I read aloud. This authorization specifically excludes the sale, transfer, or encumbrance of any real property. Signed by both of us. Witnessed by a notary. Silence settled. Traffic noise filtered up from the street below. Lawrence sat back in his chair. She sold a house she had no legal right to sell. That's not just a family dispute, Ron. That's fraud. Possibly criminal fraud. Tell me honestly, Lawrence, what's the probability they go to prison for this? He rubbed his jaw, thinking. For real estate fraud? Jennifer, unlikely if she claims Brian advised her, manipulated her. Brian, depends on what we find. If it turns out he used forged documents or pressured Jennifer, knowing she lacked authority, 3 to 5 years. A cold smile touched my lips. Then we dig deeper. Ron, Lawrence leaned forward. I have to ask, are you sure you want to go all the way? This is your daughter. Public scandal, court proceedings, possibly prison for her husband. My daughter stole my property. Her husband used the money to cover gambling debts. They didn't ask, didn't warn, didn't apologize. They thought I'd just swallow it. This could destroy your family forever. They destroyed it first. The words hung in the air. Lawrence studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Decision made. He pulled a legal pad toward him and began writing. All right. Step 1. Tomorrow morning, I send an official letter to Jennifer demanding all documentation related to the sale, contract, title transfer, closing documents. Step 2. If she refuses or the documents show fraud, we file a civil suit Tuesday to void the sale. Step 3. He looked up. Police report for fraud, possibly the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office. Faster? Law doesn't work fast, Ron. Then make it work fast. Lawrence set down his pen. I'll call Marcus Chen, real estate specialist. He can advise on the quickest path to voiding the sale. He pulled his phone out, dialed, put it on speaker, 3 rings. Marcus Chen. Marcus, it's Lawrence Stewart. I have a client situation. Need your take on expedited sale voidance. They talked for 20 minutes. Legal terminology, procedural options, timeline estimates. I listened, absorbing every word. When Lawrence ended the call, he had 3 pages of notes. We can move fast if we have evidence. I'll draft the demand letter tonight. Jennifer receives it tomorrow morning via courier. 48 hours to respond. If she complies and the documents show she exceeded her authority, we file for emergency hearing to void the sale. Simultaneously, I contact the buyer's attorney. They might not even know the sale was illegal. And criminal charges? After we have the documents, we need proof of intent, proof of knowledge. Right now, it's circumstantial. I stood, walked to the window. The city stretched below, ordered, structured, governed by laws. Laws that had been broken, laws that would respond. Tomorrow at 10, Jennifer's coming to my apartment. She's bringing the sale contract. Lawrence looked up sharply. You arranged that before calling me? Sunday morning, text message. Bring all documents, without Brian. Smart? He made another note. Get everything she has. Names of buyers, closing date, purchase price, title company, every detail. Then call me immediately. I turned from the window. What if she refuses? Then we proceed without her cooperation. Subpoena the records from the county. Takes longer, but we get there. I don't have longer. Ron, justice delayed is justice denied. Someone said that once. Lawrence smiled faintly. Martin Luther King, ironic quote in this context. Truth doesn't care about irony. I returned to the table, pulled a blank sheet from my briefcase. Write up a representation agreement. I'm authorizing you to act on my behalf. Full authority. He drafted it longhand while I stood at the window. 5 minutes later, I signed. My signature looked steady. Controlled. I'll start tonight, Lawrence said. Demand letter by morning. By Tuesday afternoon, we'll know if this goes nuclear. It already went nuclear. I closed my briefcase, latched it. Saturday night at dinner. Now we're just cleaning up the fallout. The elevator carried me down slowly, 9th floor to ground. Through the glass walls, I watched the levels drop. When I reached the lobby, sunlight slanted through the entrance. 5 o'clock. The day was ending. Tomorrow would be different. I had 18 hours until Jennifer arrived, 18 hours to prepare for what needed to be said. Sleep didn't come Sunday night. I lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, rehearsing questions, calculating responses. At 5:30, I gave up and made coffee. By 9, I'd cleared the kitchen table of everything except 2 chairs facing each other, 2 coffee cups, a glass of water, 1 glass. The doorbell rang at exactly 10. Jennifer stood in the hallway, clutching a manila folder against her chest like a shield, dark circles under her eyes. She'd been crying recently. Her makeup couldn't quite hide it. She wore a nice dress, the blue one I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago, trying to appeal to sentiment. I stepped aside without speaking. She entered, hesitated, seemed to expect an embrace that didn't come. I gestured toward the kitchen. She walked ahead of me, shoulders tight. We sat. The table between us might as well have been a courtroom bench. Contract, she blinked. Dad, Contract, now. Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. She placed a stapled document on the table, then pulled her hands back quickly as if the paper burned. I picked it up, didn't look at her, read. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a car door slammed. Jennifer fidgeted with a tissue she'd pulled from her purse. I turned pages methodically. Purchase agreement, property description, signatures. The buyer names jumped out at me, Kevin and Emily Johnson. 5 minutes passed in silence. When I finally looked up, Jennifer's face had gone pale. 200,000. I set the contract down. You sold it for 200,000? She nodded, barely perceptible. Last November, I had it appraised. 185,000, fair market value. I watched her absorb this. You sold it for 15,000 over appraised value. Quick sale, cash buyers. Brian said, her voice cracked. He said the Johnsons wanted a fast transaction. They offered cash. We needed... Who are the Johnsons? A young couple. Kevin works in tech. Emily's a teacher. Brian found them through friends. What friends? She looked down at her tissue. I don't know. He didn't say. I stood, walked to the counter, retrieved the folder I'd left there, the one with the 2018 power of attorney, returned to the table, placed it beside the contract. Do you remember this? Jennifer's eyes went to it. Recognition dawned, followed quickly by confusion. Read it aloud, what it says. Dad, read it. Her hands shook as she picked up the document. Her voice shook worse. I, Jennifer Miller, am hereby granted limited power of attorney by Ronald Miller for the purpose of paying utility bills, property taxes, and routine maintenance expenses on the property located at... Keep reading, last paragraph. She swallowed. This authorization specifically excludes the sale, transfer, or encumbrance of any real property owned by Ronald Miller. Dated March 2018. She looked up. But Brian said this covered... You sold the house without having the right to do it. Each word came out precise, hard. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a mistake. That's theft. No, Jennifer stood, the chair scraping back. I didn't know. Brian told me the power of attorney covered everything, that you'd given me authority years ago. He showed me the document, said it was fine, that you wouldn't mind because you never use the house anymore. Where's the money now? The question cut through her explanation like a blade. She stopped, mouth open. The $200,000. Where is it now? Brian gave it to the people he owed. All of it? He owed $65,000. The rest went to other debts. He didn't tell me specifics. I sat back down, poured myself water from the pitcher I'd left on the counter, deliberately poured only 1 glass, drank slowly while she stood there, watching. They came to our house. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. At night, 3 men. They said they'd break Brian's legs if he didn't pay. They knew where we lived, where I worked. Brian was terrified. I was terrified. When he said there was a way out, that we could use the lake house, you chose him. He's my husband, and I'm your father. The father whose property you stole, whose business structure you destroyed, whose trust you broke. Jennifer's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into the chair, crying now, no longer trying to hide it. The tissue disintegrated in her hands. I can fix this. Dad, please. I'll find the money somehow. We'll buy the house back from the Johnsons. Time ended Saturday. What? At dinner. When you told me. That was the last moment you could have fixed this. You could have come to me before, could have asked, could have told me Brian was in trouble. Instead, you sold my property, used forged authority, and served me dessert like everything was fine. I'm your daughter! Her voice rose, desperate now. Doesn't that mean anything? Doesn't family? My daughter wouldn't have stolen from me. The words came out flat, final. Someone who looks like my daughter did, someone who shares her name, but my daughter knew better. Please. She reached across the table toward my hand. I pulled it back. Tell me what you want. I'll do anything. Just, please don't do this. Do what? Whatever you're planning, I can see it in your eyes. You're not just angry, you're calculating. You've already made decisions. I've contacted my lawyer, Lawrence Stewart. He'll be sending you a formal demand letter tomorrow morning. You'll comply with every request. You'll provide every document related to the sale. And then we'll proceed. Proceed to what? I stood, walked to the door, opened it. That depends on what the documents reveal, on whether you cooperated willingly or under duress, on whether Brian forged anything or manipulated you, on many factors. Jennifer rose shakily, gathering the contract, her purse, the shredded tissue. She moved toward the door like someone walking through a nightmare. At the threshold, she turned back one final time. Can we still fix this? As family? Family fixes things together, before they break, not after. I closed the door. Her footsteps faded down the hallway. I stood there listening until the stairwell door clicked shut 4 floors below. The contract lay on the kitchen table. Kevin and Emily Johnson, $200,000. Sold May 5th, 5 days before I came home from Canada. Closed through Northland Title Company. Everything documented, everything traceable. I walked back to the table, sat down, picked up my phone, and called Lawrence. I have the documents, I said when he answered, and I have names. Monday evening, Lawrence worked on the lawsuit documents while I sat in my apartment, reviewing the contract one more time. Kevin and Emily Johnson. The names felt important somehow. Young couple, buying their first real home, caught in Brian's web. Tuesday morning came fast. At 8:30, I met Lawrence at the Hennepin County Courthouse. Glass and steel building, 9 stories tall, security checkpoint at the entrance. We rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence, briefcases in hand. Judge Patricia Wallace's chambers were wood-paneled, lined with law books. She was maybe 55, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Efficient movements, no wasted motion. Ronald Miller versus Jennifer Miller Parker and Brian Parker. She read the header of our petition. Sale voidance based on unauthorized use of power of attorney. Lawrence laid out the documents. Your Honor, the defendant used a limited power of attorney that explicitly excluded property sales. Here's the 2018 document with notarized signatures. Judge Wallace picked it up, read the relevant paragraph, set it down. Picked up the property deed showing Ronald as sole owner, the sale contract showing Jennifer as seller. 3 limited liability companies registered to this address. She looked at me over her glasses. Mr. Miller, these are your businesses? 20 years. My voice stayed level. Tax returns filed from that address. IRS correspondence sent there. All legal, all documented. And you weren't notified of this sale? I was in Canada, fishing, 2 weeks. I came home to dinner at my daughter's house and learned she'd sold my property 5 days earlier. Judge Wallace made a note, turned to Lawrence. You're requesting? Emergency freeze on the property. Hearing date for permanent voidance. The sale was completed May 5th. We're asking the court to act quickly before further complications arise. She wrote steadily for several minutes. We waited. Outside her window, Minneapolis traffic moved in silent streams. When she looked up, her expression was set. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order, freezing all transactions related to this property pending full hearing. No sales, transfers, or modifications until this court makes a final determination. Hearing set for May 28th, 10 a.m. She signed with a flourish. Get this to the property registry today. Thank you, Your Honor. We left with the court order in hand. 45 minutes, start to finish. In the elevator going down, Lawrence allowed himself a small smile. That was fast. Clear case, he said. Judge Wallace is good. Doesn't waste time when the facts are obvious. By noon, we stood in the property registry office. a bureaucratic space filled with computers and filing cabinets. The clerk behind the protective glass barrier was maybe 30, tired eyes, practiced movements. Lawrence handed her the court order. She read it twice, typed something into her system, frowned at her screen. Property at 847 Lakeshore Drive, currently showing sale completed May 5th to Kevin and Emily Johnson. She looked up. "You're freezing this?" "Per Judge Wallace's order." Lawrence's voice carried professional weight. "No further transactions until the court decides." More typing. The printer hummed. She handed us a stamped confirmation. "Done. It's in the system. Any attorney searching this property will see the freeze notation. We need copies of all sale documents, complete transaction record." The clerk's frown deepened. "That's public record, but it'll take time to pull everything." "We have time." I spoke for the first time. She glanced at me, then back to her computer. 20 minutes later, we walked out with a folder thick with papers, contract details, bank transfer information showing where the money went, an account in Brian's name at Wells Fargo, and something interesting. The notary public information. Margaret Cole. Office in Bloomington. Wednesday morning, I drove south on I-35 for 40 minutes. Bloomington was suburb territory, strip malls and housing developments. Margaret Cole's office sat between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation service. Small space, modest desk, notary seal prominently displayed on the wall behind her. She looked up when I entered, mid-50s, pleasant face, reading glasses pushed up into graying hair, smiled professionally. "How can I help you?" "My name is Ronald Miller. You notarized a property sale document on May 5th. Seller was Jennifer Miller Parker." The smile faded. She reached for a logbook on her desk, flipped pages, found the entry. "Yes, I remember. Young woman, very nervous. She had all the paperwork. Said she was selling her father's lake house because he was elderly and couldn't manage it anymore. I'm the father. I'm 64. I can manage fine. And she didn't have authority to sell." Margaret's face went pale. "Oh no." She showed me a power of attorney. "Did you read it?" I verified her signature against her ID. The power of attorney looked official, notarized, dated 2018. I assumed it authorized her to pay my utility bills, nothing more. Certainly not to sell real property. I kept my tone conversational, not attacking, just stating facts. The sale is being voided in court. The buyers are suing for their money back, and you notarized a fraudulent transaction. "I didn't know." Her voice rose slightly. She seemed legitimate. Everything looked proper. "I've been doing this 15 years. I'm not here to threaten you, Ms. Cole. I'm here to ask if you'll testify truthfully about what happened that day." She stared at me. Processing. "Testify?" "In court, May 28th. Just tell the truth. That she presented the document, that you verified her identity, that you didn't specifically check whether the power of attorney authorized property sales." I paused. "If you cooperate, you'll likely face no professional consequences. If you don't, I'll testify." The words came quickly. "Of course I'll testify. I didn't do anything wrong intentionally, but if I made an error in judgment, I'll own it." I pulled out my phone. "May I record you saying that, just for my lawyer's records?" She nodded. I started recording. Margaret repeated her statement, adding details about Jennifer's nervous demeanor, how Brian hadn't been present, how the whole transaction took less than 30 minutes. When I stopped recording, her hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you, Ms. Cole. Someone will contact you about the court date." Thursday, Lawrence spent the day drafting and sending certified letters. 3 of them, each carefully worded, each carrying legal weight. To Jennifer and Brian, official notification of lawsuit, court date, legal grounds for voidance, warning about criminal fraud implications. To Kevin and Emily Johnson, explanation of situation, apology that they were caught in this, notification that sale would be voided, suggestion they seek recovery from the Parkers. Each letter went out with tracking confirmation. By evening, Lawrence called. "All sent. They'll arrive Friday or Saturday. Then we wait for reactions." Friday afternoon, I sat in Lawrence's office when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, raised an eyebrow, put it on speaker. "Lawrence Stewart. This is Alan Brooks. I represent Kevin and Emily Johnson regarding a property transaction that apparently has some issues." Alan, yes, I expected your call. My client is here with me now. You're on speaker. Good. I'll be direct. My clients are confused and upset. They bought a house in good faith, paid $200,000, and now they're receiving letters claiming the sale was fraudulent. Lawrence's voice stayed professional. The seller lacked legal authority. The power of attorney she used was limited to bill payments. The sale is being voided. My clients are victims here. They didn't know about any of this. We understand that, Alan. We're not accusing your clients of wrongdoing. We're going after the Parkers. A pause, papers rustling on Brooks' end. There's something my clients told me that might be relevant. When they finalized the purchase, Brian Parker, the husband, insisted on cash payment. Not a check, not a wire transfer. Cash. $200,000 in cash. I sat forward. Lawrence and I exchanged glances. Cash for a house? Lawrence's tone sharpened. That's unusual. That's what I told them. But Parker claimed it was faster, simpler, avoided bank processing delays. My clients were first-time buyers, didn't know better. They withdrew the money from their retirement accounts and handed it over at closing. Where was this closing? Who facilitated? The notary's office, Bloomington. Woman named Margaret Cole. Parker said she was a family friend. More paper sounds. Everything seemed legitimate at the time. Now my clients are asking if they'll get their money back. That depends on whether the Parkers still have it. Lawrence made a note. And whether it's traceable. Cash transactions are difficult. I'll be honest, Lawrence. My clients are considering their own lawsuit against the Parkers for fraud. But first, they want to know what your client intends. I spoke up. This is Ronald Miller. I want the sale voided and my property returned. What happens after that, how the Johnsons recover their money, is between them and the Parkers. But I'll cooperate with any investigation. Fair enough? Brooks sounded tired. We'll see you in court on the 28th. And, Mr. Miller, I'm sorry this happened. My clients are good people. So was I, until my daughter stole from me. The call ended. Lawrence sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Cash payment. That's a red flag the size of a billboard. Why would he demand cash? Either he owed money to people who don't take checks, or he wanted the money untraceable, or both. Lawrence turned to his computer, started typing. I'm going to add this to our court filings. Cash transaction for real property suggests intent to conceal. The afternoon light slanted through the office windows. Friday traffic built below us. I thought about Brian, about that dinner last Saturday, about how casual he'd been, about how he'd thought he'd won. 3 certified letters were in the mail system now, working their way toward Adina. By tomorrow morning, Brian and Jennifer would know exactly how much trouble they faced. I looked at Lawrence. They'll get the letters tomorrow, Saturday. Probably morning delivery. Certified mail usually arrives early. Brian will react badly. Let him. Every stupid thing he does now just adds to our case. Lawrence closed his laptop. Go home. Rest. Starting tomorrow, things get loud. I drove home through rush hour, parked in my usual spot, took the elevator to the 4th floor. Inside my apartment, everything was quiet, ordered, the way I liked it. Tomorrow, Brian would open his mailbox and find a legal bomb waiting. Would he call, show up, make threats? I'd know soon enough. The waiting was almost over. Saturday morning at 9, somewhere in Adina, Brian Parker opened his mailbox and found a certified letter from Stewart & Associates, attorneys at law. I didn't need to be there to imagine his face. The confusion turning to comprehension, turning to rage. At 10 o'clock, my apartment intercom buzzed, once, twice, 10 times in rapid succession, then pounding on my door. Ronald, open up! We need to talk. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling in front of me, didn't move, didn't respond. I know you're in there. Your car's in the lot. Open this door. The pounding intensified, hard enough that neighbors would be listening. Good. Witnesses. You sue your own daughter, your own family? What kind of man does that? His voice carried down the hallway. 4th floor, 8 apartments on this level. Someone would call building security soon. Or maybe not. Maybe they'd just listen to Brian Parker destroy whatever remained of his credibility. This is insane, over a house you barely use. You're destroying Jennifer's life because you're bitter and alone. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, kept my voice low and calm when the operator answered. I'd like to report a disturbance, man pounding on my apartment door, shouting threats. The operator took my address. 8 minutes, she said. I thanked her and hung up. Brian was still going. You think this scares me? You think some lawyer and some papers change anything? That house saved my life. Those people would have killed me. And you're mad about property? About money? Interesting. He was admitting the threats were real, documenting his own desperation. Fine. Stay in there like a coward. Hide behind your lawyers. But this isn't over, old man. You hear me? This isn't over. Footsteps. He was leaving. No, stopped, came back. One more round of pounding, harder this time. You'll regret this. Then footsteps again, fading. The stairwell door banged open and shut. Silence returned to the hallway. 7 minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. Different voice this time, professional. Minneapolis police. Responding to a disturbance call? I went to the intercom. 4th floor, apartment 4C. The man who was making threats left about 5 minutes ago. Can we come up and take a statement? Yes. 2 officers arrived. Young man, maybe 28. Older woman, 40-something. Both professional, taking notes as I explained. Brian Parker, my son-in-law, current lawsuit over property fraud. He'd received legal notification this morning and came here to make threats. Did he threaten you specifically? The male officer asked. Said I'd regret this, that it wasn't over. Pounded on my door hard enough that my neighbors definitely heard. The female officer was writing. We'll check with neighbors, get their statements. You want to press charges for harassment? Not yet. Just document it. If he comes back, then yes. They took photos of my door. No damage, but they photographed it anyway. Took my statement in detail. Left me with a case number and instructions to call immediately if Brian returned. After they left, I sat back down at my coffee, still warm enough to drink. Brian had lasted exactly 1 day before losing control. 1 day between receiving the lawsuit and showing up at my door screaming. That was useful information. That spoke to judgment, to character, to how he'd behave in court. Monday morning, 2 days after the confrontation, Brian walked into a strip mall law office on the south side of Minneapolis. David Clark, attorney at law. The kind of place where attorney at law needed to be spelled out because the location itself inspired no confidence. I knew this because Jennifer called me Tuesday afternoon, crying. Dad, please, please stop this. I'd been reading when the phone rang, debated answering, decided information was worth the discomfort. Jennifer, Brian got a lawyer. He says you're trying to send him to prison. Is that true? If he committed fraud, yes, the evidence suggests he did. He made a mistake. He was desperate. Those men who threatened him, they weren't joking, Dad. They came to our house. They knew where I worked. Brian was terrified. So he stole from me. He didn't, her voice broke. He didn't think of it that way. He thought the power of attorney covered everything. He thought you wouldn't mind because you never use the house. What I use or don't use is irrelevant. It was mine. He took it without asking. That's theft, Jennifer. The law doesn't care about his reasons. You're my father. The words came out anguished. Doesn't that matter? Don't I matter? You mattered when you had a choice. Last month, when Brian was panicking about his debts. You could have called me, asked for help, explained the situation. I kept my tone level, empty of emotion. Instead, you forged authority and sold my property. You chose your path. I love him. He's my husband. I had to protect him. Then prepare to lose him. Silence. Then quietly. You're cruel. I'm just. There's a difference. She hung up. I set the phone down and returned to my book. Chapter 7 of a history text I'd been meaning to finish. Outside, afternoon traffic hummed past. Life continued, indifferent to family dramas and legal battles. That evening at 7, Brian made his second mistake. He called Kevin Johnson. I learned this Wednesday morning when Lawrence called, voice carrying barely suppressed satisfaction. Ron, you need to hear this. Alan Brooks just sent me something. Audio file. I'm putting it on speaker. Click. Static. Then Brian's voice, unmistakable. Kevin Johnson? Who is this? Kevin sounded suspicious. Smart man. This is Brian Parker. We met during the house closing. I wanted to talk to you about... You've got to be kidding me. You're calling me after that lawsuit notice? After what you did? That's what I want to explain. It's all a misunderstanding. Ronald, Jennifer's father, he's elderly, confused. He doesn't understand modern business practices. The power of attorney was completely legitimate, but he's making trouble because he's making trouble? You cost us $200,000. That's not, look, the money's fine. The sale was legal. Once this gets to court, the judge will see that Jennifer had every right. Your wife had no right. The lawyer explained it. The power of attorney specifically excluded property sales. Brian's voice got higher, more desperate. That's just legal technicality. The spirit of the document? The spirit? We paid cash, Brian. $200,000 in cash because you insisted. What legitimate real estate transaction uses cash? I explained that. Faster processing, avoids bank delays. It's shady, that's what it is. And now we're finding out the whole sale was fraudulent? Kevin's anger was building. We want our money back, from you. I don't have it. I told you it went to paying off. Your gambling debts. Yeah, we heard. So you stole from your wife's father to cover your poker losses. And now you're calling me, asking for what? Sympathy? I'm asking you to tell the truth in court, that the sale was legitimate, that I didn't lie to you. But you did lie. You said it was a family sale, house belonged to Jennifer, everything was clean. None of that was true. Please, Brian's voice cracked slightly. If you testify against me, they'll charge me with fraud, prison. I'm asking you, one guy to another. One guy to another? You scammed us. You used your wife to steal from an old man. And now you're trying to manipulate me into perjury? Kevin's voice went cold. We're done. Don't call this number again. Click. The recording ended. Lawrence's voice came back on. Alan sent this over an hour ago. Kevin recorded the whole conversation on his phone. Smart move. He suspected Brian might try something. Witness tampering. Exactly. That's a separate crime. Attempting to influence witness testimony before trial. Lawrence sounded pleased. I'm adding this to our filing. Between the fraudulent sale, the cash transaction, the confrontation at your apartment, and now this. Brian's building quite the case against himself. When's the court date again? May 28th, 1 week from today. Will this be enough? To void the sale? Absolutely. For criminal charges? He paused. I think so. The prosecutor's office will want to see this. Cash transaction plus witness tampering shows pattern of intentional criminal behavior. Wednesday afternoon passed quietly. I read, made dinner, watched evening news. Normal life, or as normal as possible with a courtroom battle looming. Thursday morning, Lawrence called again. Update. I spoke with the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office. They're interested, very interested, sending someone to observe the hearing next week. If we win, when we win, they'll likely file charges against Brian, Jennifer too, possibly, though they might offer her a deal if she testifies against him. Jennifer won't testify against Brian. She might if it's her only option. Prison does wonders for clarifying one's priorities. I thought about my daughter, about the woman who'd sat across from me 10 days ago, trembling and crying, about how she'd chosen Brian over everything else, over truth, over legality, over her own father. She'll choose him, I said, even if it destroys her. Then she'll go down with him. That's her choice to make. Lawrence was right. Everyone made choices. Jennifer had made hers. Brian had made his. I'd made mine. Court's at 10 a.m. next Tuesday? Yes, I'll meet you at the courthouse at 9:30. Dress formally. This is serious proceeding. Judge Wallace doesn't appreciate casual attitudes. Understood. After the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table with the folder of documents. Power of attorney from 2018. Sale contract from May 5th. Bank records showing the cash transaction. Police report from Brian's Saturday morning outburst. Kevin Johnson's recording of Brian's attempted witness tampering. A complete record of betrayal, desperation, and stupidity. Brian had done most of my work for me. Every impulsive action, every threatening word, every desperate phone call, all of it documented. All of it adding weight to the case against him. 7 days until court. 7 days until Judge Wallace made her ruling. 7 days until Brian Parker learned that actions had consequences. I closed the folder and put it in my briefcase. The waiting was almost over. Wednesday evening, after we'd secured Kevin Johnson's recording of Brian's witness tampering attempt, Lawrence and I sat in his office discussing next moves. The court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, 5 days away. We had enough to win the civil case, but something nagged at me. The cash, I said. $200,000 in cash. Why? Lawrence leaned back in his chair. Desperate men make stupid choices. Or calculated ones. I tapped the folder on his desk. Brian claimed he owed $65,000, but he demanded $200. Where did the rest go? Good question. Lawrence pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. I know someone who might help us answer it. Former Minneapolis PD detective. Does private work now. Very good at following money trails. Thursday morning at 10, Walter Gray walked into Lawrence's office. 60 years old, gray hair cropped military short, suit that had seen better days but was clean and pressed, handshake firm, eyes sharp. Walter, this is Ronald Miller. Ron, Walter Gray, 25 years with the Financial Crimes Unit before he retired. We shook hands. Walter sat across from me, pulled out a small notebook. Lawrence gave me basics on the phone. Your son-in-law sold your property without authority, claimed gambling debts. You want to know if there's more to the story. I want to know everything about Brian Parker's finances, every bank account, every debt, every place he gambles, every person he owes money to. I kept my voice level. Can you do that in 5 days? Walter smiled slightly. I can do it in 3. My fee is $2,500 for a rush job. Done. He made notes while Lawrence provided Brian's basic information. Full name, address, social security number that we'd pulled from the sale documents. 10 minutes later, Walter closed his notebook. I'll call you Monday with what I find. Expect details. Friday through Sunday passed slowly. I went about normal routines, grocery shopping, reading, walks around my neighborhood. But my mind stayed on the investigation. What would Walter find? More debts, criminal connections, evidence of worse crimes. Monday morning at 9:30, my phone rang. Lawrence. Walter's here with his report. Can you come to the office? I was there in 20 minutes. Walter had spread documents across Lawrence's conference table. Bank statements, credit reports, surveillance photos, a thick folder of printed materials. Brian Parker is a busy man, Walter began. 3 bank accounts, First National, that's the main one, where the $200,000 landed. Wells Fargo, he's had this one for 5 years, uses it for cash withdrawals. U.S. Bank, opened 6 months ago, probably when the other accounts started looking suspicious. Suspicious how? Lawrence was taking notes. Constant transfers between accounts. Money comes in, immediately moves to a different account, then cash withdrawals. Classic pattern for hiding activity volume. Walter pulled out a printed spreadsheet. Over the past 12 months, I tracked $130,000 moving through these accounts. I sat forward. 130? He claimed 65. He lied, not surprising. Walter laid out photos, Brian entering a building, Brian leaving, timestamps visible. These are from various days over the past 3 months. Notice the location? The building looked like a dive bar. Neon sign, Lucky 7. It's in the St. Paul suburbs. Officially, it's a bar. Unofficially, there's a poker room in the basement. Been operating about 5 years. Police know about it but don't interfere. Too much money involved, too many influential people playing there. Lawrence frowned. Underground gambling operation. That changes things. It gets better. Walter opened another folder. I talked to a few people who know Brian, bartender at Lucky 7, a guy who works security. Brian's a regular, 3-4 nights a week, always cash, always losing. He paused. They call him ATM behind his back because he just keeps feeding money into the games. The room went quiet. I stared at the photos, the bank statements, the pattern of Brian's self-destruction. $130,000 in a year, I said. That's not desperation, that's addiction. Correct. Walter closed the folder. Everything I found is documented here. Legal, obtained through proper channels. You can use it in court. After Walter left, Lawrence and I sat with the evidence. 30 minutes of silence, reading, processing. At 2 o'clock, Lawrence's phone buzzed. Message from his assistant. Bank documents ready for pickup. We'd submitted a court-ordered subpoena last week for Brian's primary account statements. The bank had finally complied. We drove to First National Bank downtown. The branch manager handed Lawrence a sealed envelope. Back in the office, we spread the new statements beside Walter's findings. 12 months of transactions, deposits, withdrawals, transfers. I read through April, then May. Stopped. April 24th. Withdrawal of $65,000. Lawrence looked. 3 weeks before the house sale, so the debt he claimed was urgent was already paid. I kept reading. May 6th, transfer of $3,000 to Wells Fargo account. May 6th, that's 1 day after the house sale. We sat with that. Brian had sold my house for $200,000, claimed it all went to creditors, but here was proof. $3,000 transferred the day after to a personal account. Money for himself. He lied about the urgency, Lawrence said quietly. He lied about where the money went. He committed fraud not just out of desperation, but for personal gain. Can we prove criminal intent? With this? Absolutely. Lawrence pulled out his phone. I'm calling Stephen Mars. He needs to see this. Stephen Mars worked for the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office. Lawrence had mentioned him before. Law school classmate, good relationship, handled white-collar crime cases. The call was brief. Stephen would meet us tomorrow morning. Tuesday at 11, Stephen sat where Walter had sat yesterday, reviewing the same evidence. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He read through everything twice. The underground casino is federal jurisdiction, he said finally. Lucky 7 has been on FBI radar for 2 years. Money laundering, organized crime connections. If Brian Parker's moving this much cash through there, he tapped the bank statements. That's not just gambling addiction. That's potentially money laundering. Lawrence and I exchanged glances. I'd wanted justice. I hadn't anticipated this level of consequence. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting this case just got bigger than property fraud. Stephen pulled out his phone, made a note. I'm going to forward these materials to the FBI field office, Financial Crimes Division. They'll want to talk to you, probably. And they'll definitely want to talk to Brian Parker. Timeline? FBI works slowly, weeks, maybe months before they decide to act. But the investigation starts now. He looked at me directly. Mr. Miller, are you prepared for your son-in-law to potentially face federal charges? I thought about Saturday night, about Jennifer serving me coffee while knowing she'd stolen my property, about Brian's smug face across the dinner table, about 20 years of building something legitimate, only to have it nearly destroyed by a gambling addict and a thief. Yes, Stephen nodded. Then we proceed. I'll coordinate with FBI. Your civil case tomorrow is separate. That's about property recovery. This new investigation is about much larger crimes. The two tracks run parallel. After Stephen left, Lawrence and I sat in his office as afternoon light slanted through windows. Tomorrow was the hearing. Judge Wallace would rule on the property. Brian and Jennifer would be there, probably with their inadequate lawyer. Kevin and Emily Johnson would attend, wanting their money back, and none of them would know that federal investigation had already begun. Tomorrow we win the civil case, Lawrence said. The criminal case is just starting. How long until Brian realizes? Months, maybe a year. FBI doesn't announce investigations. They build cases quietly, thoroughly. Then one morning, agents show up at your door. Lawrence closed his laptop. By the time Brian knows what's happening, it'll be too late to run. I drove home through evening traffic. Tomorrow at 10, the court hearing would begin. I had everything I needed: documents, witnesses, evidence. The property would return to me. Brian would owe the Johnsons $200,000 he didn't have. And somewhere in federal offices, investigators were opening a file on Brian Parker's financial crimes. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. The waiting was almost over. Wednesday morning, I dressed in my best suit, dark gray, white shirt, burgundy tie, professional, serious. The kind of outfit that tells a judge you respect the court. I left my apartment at 8:30, drove downtown through light traffic. Lawrence waited outside courtroom 4 at 9:45. He wore his trial suit, carried a leather briefcase I knew contained everything we'd spent 3 weeks assembling. We shook hands without speaking, no words necessary. Jennifer and Brian arrived at 9:50. They walked down the hallway from the opposite direction, her in a conservative dress, him in an ill-fitting suit that probably came from the back of his closet. David Clark shuffled behind them, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jennifer's eyes found mine. I looked away. At 9:55, Kevin and Emily Johnson appeared with their lawyer, Alan Brooks. Kevin wore an expression somewhere between anger and resignation. Emily's face was pale, drawn. They'd lost their life savings to Brian's fraud. I nodded to them. Kevin nodded back. At 10 o'clock, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. All rise, the Honorable Patricia Wallace presiding. Judge Wallace entered from her chambers, same efficient movements I remembered from 3 weeks ago, same no-nonsense expression. We all stood. She settled behind the bench, surveyed the room with practiced eyes. Be seated. Case number 25 CV8473. Ronald Miller versus Jennifer Miller Parker and Brian Parker. Property sale avoidance and fraud allegations. She looked at Lawrence. Counselor Stewart, present your case. Lawrence stood, buttoned his jacket. For the next 25 minutes, he methodically dismantled Brian and Jennifer's defense before they'd even made it. He started with the 2018 power of attorney, walking Judge Wallace through every word of paragraph 3. This authorization specifically excludes the sale, transfer, or encumbrance of any real property. Read it twice, slowly, clearly. Then the sale contract. Ronald Miller listed as property owner. Jennifer Miller Parker listed as seller, claiming authority through power of attorney. Sold for $200,000, $15,000 above last year's appraisal, which seemed fair until you learned the buyers paid cash. Finally, the bank records, Brian Parker's gambling debts, the underground casino, the money transfers, the $3,000 Brian kept for himself the day after selling property that wasn't his to sell. David Clark tried twice to object. Judge Wallace shut him down both times. Mr. Clark, does the power of attorney document authorize property sales? Yes or no? Technically no, Your Honor, but the family circumstances. Yes or no, Counselor? No. Then sit down. Mr. Stewart, call your first witness. Margaret Cole took the stand nervously. The notary who'd certified Jennifer's signature without checking authority. She admitted everything, that Jennifer seemed legitimate, that the documents looked proper, that she'd failed to verify the specific limits of the power of attorney. Did Mrs. Parker tell you she had authority to sell the property? Lawrence asked. She said her father had given her power of attorney years ago, that he was elderly and wanted her to handle his affairs. Did she say he'd specifically authorized this sale? Margaret paused. She said he wouldn't mind, that he never used the house anyway. That's not the same as authorization, is it? No, it's not. Kevin Johnson testified next. Calm, factual, damaging. He described Brian's approach, friendly at first, claiming to sell his father-in-law's vacation property because the old man was moving to Florida for retirement. Did Mr. Parker mention that his father-in-law hadn't actually authorized the sale? Lawrence asked. No, he said everything was arranged, that his wife had power of attorney and full authority. And the payment method? Cash. He insisted on cash. Said it would speed things up, avoid bank delays. Kevin's voice hardened. My wife and I withdrew $200,000 from our retirement accounts, handed it to him in bundles. He counted it right there in the notary's office, then left. At 11:30, Judge Wallace called a 15-minute recess. We stood as she exited. Brian was sweating despite the courtroom's air conditioning. Jennifer stared at her hands. David Clark looked like he wanted to disappear. We reconvened at 11:45. Judge Wallace reviewed her notes for several minutes, then looked up. I've heard sufficient evidence. This is a straightforward case. The power of attorney document explicitly excludes property sales. Mrs. Parker exceeded her authority. Mr. Parker knowingly participated in and benefited from an unauthorized transaction. The fact that their family doesn't grant them legal right to someone else's property. She signed a document her clerk had prepared. The sale contract dated May 5, 2025 is hereby declared void. Property located at 847 Lakeshore Drive is restored to Ronald Miller. Defendants Jennifer Miller Parker and Brian Parker are ordered to repay Kevin and Emily Johnson $200,000 within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in asset seizure and potential criminal contempt charges. Brian stood abruptly. Chair scraped against floor. We don't have $200,000. That's impossible. Judge Wallace's expression didn't change. Then you should have considered that before fraudulently selling property that didn't belong to you. The court's ruling stands. This is insane, Brian's voice rose. You're destroying my family over a house that old man barely uses. He's just bitter and wants revenge. Mr. Parker, sit down. No, I won't sit down while you ruin my life. I did what I had to do. Those people were going to hurt me. What was I supposed to do? Mr. Parker, final warning. Sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. Brian turned toward me, face red, eyes wild. You're doing this. You could forgive her, but you won't. What kind of father are you? The bailiffs were already moving. 2 of them, experienced, professional. They reached Brian as he started toward our table. You'll regret this. You hear me? This isn't over. They had his arms. He struggled, still shouting. Jennifer was crying, reaching for him. David Clark sat frozen. You'll pay for this. I promise you'll pay. The bailiffs pulled him toward the side door. His voice echoed as they dragged him out. One final shout before the door closed. I'll make you sorry. Silence settled over the courtroom like dust. Judge Wallace straightened her papers calmly, as if violent outbursts happened every day. Maybe they did. Bailiff, prepare a contempt citation for Mr. Parker. He can collect it when he calms down. She looked at Lawrence. Counselor Stewart, given the defendant's financial situation and Mr. Parker's demonstrated character, I'm also forwarding the case materials to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal fraud charges. Thank you, Your Honor. This hearing is adjourned. We stood as she exited. The moment her chamber door closed, Jennifer turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please. I walked past her. Lawrence followed. Behind us, I heard Jennifer's voice break completely, heard Alan Brooks comforting the Johnsons, heard David Clark's quiet suggestion that Jennifer leave before Brian returned from wherever security had taken him. Outside the courthouse, warm May sunshine hit my face. I stopped on the steps, breathing free air. Behind me, the door opened. Jennifer. You won! You got everything. What more do you want? I turned, looked at her, really looked at the woman who'd chosen a gambling addict over her own father, who'd stolen property and lied about it, who even now couldn't accept responsibility. Justice, I said. Justice? We owe $200,000 we don't have. Brian just got dragged out of court. The prosecutor's getting involved. What more justice do you need? Your problem, not mine. I walked down the steps, Lawrence beside me. Jennifer's voice followed us. I hate you. Do you hear me? I hate you. I didn't turn around, didn't respond, just kept walking toward the parking garage where my car waited. Behind us, Jennifer's crying faded. Ahead, the city stretched out. Ordered streets, law-abiding citizens, a system of justice that worked slowly but thoroughly. My phone buzzed. Text from Lawrence. Prosecutor wants meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. FBI materials ready. I typed back, I'll be there. The civil case was over, property recovered, court ruling complete. But the criminal investigation, that was just beginning. Brian Parker didn't know it yet, but federal agents were already building his file. I reached my car, got in, started the engine, drove home through midday traffic. Tomorrow would bring new developments, more evidence, deeper consequences. For now, I'd won what I came for. The rest would follow in time. Justice didn't rush, but it didn't forget either. Thursday and Friday passed in administrative silence. Lawrence called Thursday evening to confirm Stephen Mars had forwarded all materials to the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Friday morning, the federal case file opened with a new name attached, Special Agent Thomas Wright. I didn't meet Wright until much later. Everything I learned about those first days came through Lawrence, who had contacts in the prosecutor's office. Wright was 45, former IRS investigator who'd moved to FBI 10 years ago, specialized in following money through complex trails. His partner, Agent Linda Chen, handled the organized crime connections. They spent Friday and Saturday reviewing the case, bank statements showing $130,000 moving through Brian's 3 accounts. Walter Gray's detective report documenting the Lucky 7 casino, surveillance photos, court transcripts. By Sunday morning, Wright had built his hypothesis. Brian Parker was a small fish swimming in a pond controlled by bigger predators. The casino owner, Marco Deli, had appeared in a 2019 federal investigation of the Santini crime family. Charges hadn't stuck, but the connection existed. Sunday afternoon, Wright presented his case to FBI supervisors. By evening, he had what he needed: federal search warrant for the Lake House property, surveillance authorization for Lucky 7 Casino. The operation would move fast. Monday, search the crime scene. Tuesday, question Brian Parker. Wednesday, raid the casino. Monday morning at 9, 3 FBI vehicles pulled up to 847 Lakeshore Drive. Emily Johnson was inside. The Johnsons had started moving furniture before the court voided the sale, and Emily had returned to collect some belongings. She opened the door to Agent Wright's badge and warrant. FBI, ma'am, we have authorization to search these premises as part of an ongoing financial crimes investigation. Emily's face went white. What? I don't understand. We bought this house legally. The purchase is part of the investigation, ma'am, not you personally. Please step outside while we conduct our search. Lawrence called me at 11 with the update. FBI's at the lake house. Searched it for 4 hours. Emily Johnson was there. Apparently she called Kevin, who called Alan Brooks, who called me asking what's happening. What did you tell him? That his clients aren't targets, that FBI's investigating Brian Parker for financial crimes, potentially connected to organized gambling operations. Lawrence paused. Alan asked if you knew this was coming. I said you'd provided materials to the prosecutor, but FBI moves on its own timeline. At 11:30, my phone rang. Jennifer. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Dad, why is the FBI at the house? Her voice carried pure panic. I kept mine level. Brian's under investigation for financial crimes. The lake house was the site of the fraudulent transaction. They're collecting evidence. Evidence of what? We already lost in court. What more do they want? Your husband gambled away $130,000, not $65,000. He used an underground casino with organized crime connections. He demanded cash payment for my house. These are federal crimes, Jennifer. Silence, then quietly. $130,000? The FBI has bank records, 3 different accounts, transfers designed to hide the volume of money moving through. The Lucky 7 casino in St. Paul, that's where it all went, every dollar. He told me $65,000. He lied, like he lied about the power of attorney authorizing the sale, like he lied about where the money went afterward. I looked out my apartment window at the city below. Did you know anything about your husband, his addiction, his connections? I knew he played poker sometimes. I didn't know, her voice broke. I didn't know it was this bad. Now you do. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I didn't answer. Tuesday afternoon, Brian received a call from Agent Wright requesting he come to the FBI office downtown for questioning. Voluntary, Wright said. Just need to clarify some details about your financial activity. Brian went without a lawyer, critical mistake born of arrogance. He thought he could talk his way through anything. The interrogation lasted 2 hours. Wright was methodical, started with bank statements, walked Brian through every large withdrawal, every transfer, every cash deposit. Brian tried denying, claiming he'd won some of it back, insisting he'd only visited Lucky 7 a few times. Wright showed him surveillance photos, 43 visits over 12 months, different times, different days, always carrying cash in, leaving with nothing. Where did this money come from, Mr. Parker? Your salary is $48,000 a year. You gambled away $130,000. Explain the difference. Brian couldn't. He tried mentioning bonuses, side jobs, inheritance. Wright methodically dismantled each claim with documentation. Do you know Marco Deli? Brian's expression changed. Fear flickered across his face. The casino owner. You've met him, yes? Spoken to him about your debts? I want a lawyer. That's your right. Wright closed his folder. Interview terminated at 4:17 p.m. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Parker. Brian left the FBI office shaking. Wright was satisfied. The nervousness at Deli's name confirmed everything. Wednesday morning, 5:30 a.m., 20 FBI agents descended on Lucky 7. Tactical entry, coordinated takedowns, everything by the book. 12 arrests including Marco Deli and his 2 managers. Seizures totaling $340,000 in cash. Poker tables, computers, financial records spanning 5 years. In Deli's office safe, they found ledgers documenting far more than just gambling, loan sharking, money laundering through legitimate businesses, names of people who'd borrowed and couldn't pay. Brian Parker's name appeared 3 times with amounts: $15,000, $22,000, $28,000. Total, $65,000. The amount Brian had originally claimed he owed. But the dates showed these were new debts, taken on after he'd already sold my house. The pattern became clear. Brian hadn't used my house money to pay old debts. He'd used it to gamble more, lost it all, then borrowed from Delhi to cover living expenses, the cycle feeding itself endlessly downward. Lawrence called Wednesday afternoon with the raid results. Marco Delhi's going away for a long time. Racketeering, money laundering, loan sharking. Brian's name is all over the financial records. If FBI can prove Brian knowingly participated in money laundering, even indirectly by feeding cash into the operation, he's looking at 10 to 15 years federal time. And if they can't prove that, just illegal gambling participation, unauthorized real estate transaction, fraud, 3 to 5 years. Either way, he's finished. Has he been arrested? Not yet. FBI is still building the case. Probably within 2 weeks. They'll let him sweat first, see if he tries to run. Wednesday evening, Jennifer called again. This time, I answered immediately. They raided the casino. Her voice sounded hollowed out. People arrested. It's all over the news. Brian could go to prison for years. Federal prison. Yes. How can you sound so calm? This is destroying my life. You helped destroy mine first. Turnabout seems fair. I didn't know about the casino. I didn't know about 130,000. I thought he owed 65 and we paid it. Now you know the truth. Your husband is a fraud, an addict, and a criminal, and you helped him steal from me to feed his addiction. You're cruel. You're heartless. How can you be my father and do this to me? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. The lake house was mine, legally, ethically, in every way that matters. You took it without permission, sold it, gave the money to a man who gambled it away and lied to you about it. You chose him over everything, over honesty, over law, over your own father. I kept my voice level, empty of heat. I didn't do this to you, Jennifer. You did it to yourself. I just responded. I hate you. I know. I hung up, put the phone on silent, sat in my apartment as evening darkened to night. The FBI had what they needed. Delhi was in custody. Brian would be arrested soon. Jennifer's marriage was imploding, and I sat alone with my victory, wondering why it didn't feel the way I'd expected. Justice was coming, slowly, methodically, inevitably. Brian Parker would pay for his crimes. The system would work. But sitting there in the silence, I realized something. Revenge wasn't a destination. It was a road that never quite reached the place you thought it would. You got what you wanted, consequences, accountability, punishment, but the satisfaction felt colder than anticipated, sharper, more isolated. Tomorrow would bring new developments, federal charges probably, more calls from Lawrence, maybe another desperate call from Jennifer that I wouldn't answer. The wheels were turning. Federal machinery, once engaged, moved with inexorable force. All I had to do now was wait and watch as everything I'd set in motion reached its conclusion. 3 weeks since that Saturday dinner. 3 weeks since I'd learned my daughter stole from me. And now federal agents were building a case that would send her husband to prison for years. I'd won. Completely, totally, absolutely. So, why did my apartment feel so empty? Thursday, June 5th. Federal prosecutor Margaret Foster stood before a judge and read formal charges against Brian Parker. Real estate fraud under federal jurisdiction, participation in illegal gambling operations, conspiracy to commit money laundering. Each charge carried 3 to 15 years. Together, they represented the end of Brian's freedom for the foreseeable future. Brian stood before the federal judge, face pale, finally understanding the full weight of what he'd done. His court-appointed attorney stood beside him. Brian couldn't afford anyone better. Do you understand these charges, Mr. Parker? Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that, if convicted, you face substantial prison time? Yes, Your Honor. The machinery of federal justice began its slow, thorough work. Within days, Brian managed to scrape together enough money to hire Richard Graham, a competent defense attorney who reviewed the evidence and delivered the assessment Brian didn't want to hear. If we go to trial, the jury will convict you. The evidence is overwhelming. Bank statements, witness testimony, casino surveillance, your own recorded attempts to tamper with witnesses. You'll get 8 to 12 years, probably closer to 12. What's the alternative? Plea deal. I negotiate with the prosecutor. You plead guilty to the main charges, waive your right to trial, accept responsibility. In exchange, they recommend reduced sentence, 4 years federal custody probably. Maybe 3 if we're lucky. 4 years. Brian agonized over it for 3 weeks, But reality was inescapable. The evidence was crushing, and trial meant maximum punishment. In mid-July, he accepted the plea deal. The sentencing hearing was brief. Brian had nothing to say. The judge read the agreement. 4 years at FCI Sandstone Federal Prison in Minnesota, $50,000 fine, financial restrictions for 10 years after release, including reporting requirements and gambling prohibition. Mr. Parker, you defrauded an elderly man, stole his property, and used the proceeds to fund illegal gambling activities. You've shown poor judgment, dishonesty, and contempt for the law. 4 years is lenient given the circumstances. I suggest you use that time to reflect on better choices. The marshals took Brian into custody immediately. Jennifer watched from the gallery, crying silently. Her lawyer had advised her weeks earlier, file for divorce now or share responsibility for Brian's $50,000 fine plus court costs. 8 years of marriage ending with paperwork and signatures. She filed. The process would take 45 days. In July, the court issued final orders restoring the lake house property to Ronald Miller's name. The registry updated its records. The keys returned to me through Lawrence's office. Kevin and Emily Johnson received $42,000 from seized assets. Partial refund, better than nothing. The remaining $158,000 was lost forever, absorbed by Brian's gambling addiction and criminal activity. Early August, I drove out to the lake house for the first time since this all began. 4 months since Jennifer sold it. 3 months since I learned about the betrayal. The house looked the same. Wood siding, green shutters, the dock extending into Lake Minnetonka's calm water. Inside, everything was empty. The Johnsons had removed their furniture after the sale was voided. I walked through rooms that echoed with each footstep. Kitchen where I'd made breakfast for Jennifer when she was young. Living room where we'd watched movies. The small bedroom where she'd stayed during visits. Memories everywhere. And silence. I spent a week there, cleaned, repaired loose boards on the deck, sat on the dock watching the water, drinking coffee, thinking about costs and consequences. Mid-August, a letter arrived at my apartment forwarded from my old address. Jennifer's handwriting on the envelope. I almost didn't open it. Sat with it for an hour before finally unfolding the pages. Dad, I know you probably won't read this. I know I don't deserve for you to read it, but I need to write it anyway. You were right about everything. Brian lied to me about the debts, about the money, about how bad his addiction was. I didn't want to see it. I chose to believe him because believing him was easier than facing the truth, that I'd married someone who would steal from my own father. I'm getting divorced. Brian's in prison for 4 years. My life is ruined. I lost my job because the scandal made clients uncomfortable. I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment and working retail to pay rent. But the worst part isn't any of that. The worst part is that I lost you. I betrayed you. I stole from you. I chose a gambling addict over my own father, and now I have nothing. No husband, no career, no father, no home. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did. I understand what it cost, and I'm sorry. So deeply, completely sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give you back the trust I destroyed. But it's all I have left to give you. Your daughter, Jennifer. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. The last weekend of August, I returned to the lake house. Saturday morning, I sat on the porch with coffee, watching sunrise paint the water gold and pink. Peaceful, quiet, mine again. My phone rang. Lawrence. How are you doing out there? Fine, quiet. That's good. You deserve some peace. He paused. Jennifer's divorce finalized yesterday. Officially single as of Friday afternoon. I know, she sent a letter. Did you read it? Yes. And? I watched a bird land on the dock railing. She says she's sorry. Says she understands now what she did. Maybe that's true. Maybe she does understand. But? Lawrence knew me well enough to hear the unspoken. But sorry doesn't restore trust. Sorry doesn't change what happened. She made her choice when she signed those papers. I made mine when I decided to pursue justice instead of forgiveness. The coffee was cooling in my hands. Did I do the right thing, Lawrence? I got my house back. Brian's in prison. Justice was served, But my daughter isn't in my life. Maybe won't ever be again. You could have stopped after winning the civil case. Didn't have to involve the FBI. Could have. But then Brian would have gotten away with fraud, gambling addiction, criminal activity. He would have just kept destroying lives. Jennifer's, the next victims, someone's. I set down the coffee cup. Justice demanded more than just getting my property back. And you can live with that choice, with the consequences? I thought about that question, really thought about it. The empty house, the silent phone, the letter in my drawer that I hadn't answered and probably never would. The victory that felt colder than expected. I'll have to. Can't change it now. I looked out at the lake, at the water reflecting morning light. She chose Brian over everything, over truth, over law, over her own father. That choice cost her everything. My choice cost me her. We both pay the price for our decisions. That's a hard way to live, Ron. Living isn't always supposed to be easy. Sometimes it's just supposed to be right. We talked a few more minutes, then hung up. I sat there on the porch of the house I'd fought for, won back, and now owned again completely. Peaceful morning, beautiful view, perfect silence, justice restored, family lost. Fair trade? I didn't know. Probably never would. But I'd made my choice that Saturday night 4 months ago when I sat at Jennifer's table and learned what she'd done. In that moment, something had broken that couldn't be repaired with apologies or time. She'd betrayed fundamental trust. I'd responded with methodical, complete revenge. Both of us would live with the consequences forever. The sun climbed higher. The lake sparkled. A new day beginning, like every day does, regardless of human drama and broken relationships. The world kept turning. Life continued. I finished my coffee, stood up, walked inside. The house was quiet, empty. Mine. And somehow, sitting there in the space I'd reclaimed, I felt both victorious and utterly alone. Justice has a price. I'd known that going in. But knowing and feeling are different things. You can understand intellectually that revenge will cost you, that choosing justice over mercy has consequences, that winning can mean losing something else equally valuable. But understanding it and living with it, those are entirely different experiences. August ended, summer fading into fall. The lake house stood unchanged, restored to my name, legally and permanently mine again. Brian Parker sat in a federal prison cell. Jennifer lived somewhere in Minneapolis, alone with her choices and consequences. And I sat on my porch watching the water, wondering if peace was supposed to feel this quiet. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.